Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello and welcome, my friends, to episode 156, where we're going to get very practical, and I'm going to give you a intimacy and communication essential. And I sort of can't believe I've waited this long to talk about this, but this one is important, essential, and it's a great episode to invite your partner to listen to as well. Don't force, just invite, because this is something beautiful that you can both learn and get better at, and it will make an enormous difference in your marriage. And I should make a note that if your partner is not up for listening, that doesn't mean that you can't bring this into your relationship and lead by example and really make it part of the culture of your relationship without him listening and without him doing it directly from my teachings. He'll follow your lead if you do it consistently. So on that note, I just want to say that you've probably noticed that I'm all about making big, beautiful, loving sea changes in our marriages, in your marriage, by bringing a lot more love and compassion and like unconditional acceptance into how we approach our marriages and intentionality, right? Because this is honestly the only way that I've ever seen that actually works to generate more of the love and kind of being that connected and supportive team in life together. Right? Like, really, we can only have more love by loving. And if something in that doesn't ring deeply true, then this podcast is probably not the place for you. But because you're here, I know you have a sensitive, big, deep heart. And so this probably does resonate. In which case, I want to share something super simple. And if you keep it in mind and you live with it in mind, it's going to make a huge difference in the quality of love and connection and supportiveness and intimacy and capacity to communicate well in your marriage, which is that when it comes down to it, in an intimate relationship, what every one of us wants, and that means you and your partner, is each other's kind, caring presence. And I mean presence as in very much being present with. This is deep down what each of us most wants in the simplest sense. So if you take nothing else from this episode, please hear that. And if you want to give your marriage the best chance to be the fulfilling and connected one that you want, really that new marriage that we talked about last episode, and you want to give you and your partner the very best chance to be the loving, supportive partner that you want, then the most practical thing that you can do is to relate to them in the way you want them to relate to you. So since this episode is a great one to share with your partner, if they're listening, the same goes for you, partner, right? The most practical thing you can do is to relate to your honey the way you want them to relate to you. And one of the most practical ways you can do that is offering your kind, caring presence, right? And it is also to improve your communication by cultivating a loving, connected presence with that person that you love, with that partner, right? In other words, learning how to hold space for them, listening to them with compassion and openness and interest and attentiveness when they're speaking. Yeah? This is so big, you guys. And so many of us don't do this. And not to get into that, like, it's not your fault that you don't do it. It's just like, it's not something that's generally taught or cultivated in our society very well, right? But, listening to them, being present with them, really being open and attentive and interested is so important, especially when your partner is speaking about something that is important to them, or something that's feeling hard for them, or something about your relationship that feels hard for them, or, something that feels close to their heart. So it's also great to listen in these ways and be present in these ways when your partner's making like a passing comment, or just speaking about logistics, like what's going to happen tomorrow, or who's going to put the kids to bed, or whatever, right? That's important, but it's not so much when holding space, as we call it, is most important. So for ease and practical purposes, your invitation is to practice what I'm going to share today in those moments when you can see that your partner is on the verge of opening up about something that's close to their heart, or is actually doing so. So you may or may not have heard the term, quote, holding space, quote. It's a fairly, I hear it all the time in my relationship world, right? But I think whether you've heard it or not, what it exactly means may not be super clear. So we're going to dive into that now. And the truth is that so many of my clients say that their partners aren't exactly natural at this, being present. Really, that's what holding space is, but I want to give you some more nuances and specifics. So many of my clients' partners are not great at this or natural at this. And the truth is, my clients generally are not naturals or great at this either. Some of you may be, and I think there is a tendency for us as highly sensitive women to be more naturally inclined to just naturally be good at this, right? But I wasn't always good at this. I'm still not always perfect at this, right? Like, as a human being, this can be challenging, especially in intimate relationships, especially when emotions get stirred up, right? So in any case, when one or both of us in the relationship are not great at this, it makes for a lot of unnecessary feelings of being misunderstood, disconnected, hurt, angry, resentful, all the things, right? And the truth is, this is not really an instinctual way to be with another human. Again, at least not in our culture, right? But it can become a very natural way when we practice it, when we learn it. And when it is done, when you do it, it's going to make a huge difference in how easeful, how happy, and how connected your relationship is. So whether you're already good at it or not, there's always room to get better. And because this might be a little less natural for men, because primarily of socialization, I really wanted to make sure male partners had an opportunity to listen to this, because honestly, this is actually something that takes strength and is super powerful if you want to be a great husband. And I know that if you're listening and you're a man, you do want to be a great husband. So the benefits of this holding space and this compassionate, open listening are really huge for your relationship. And more important than me listing them here is you trying it out and seeing for yourself. So definitely do that. Take what I'm going to share and implement. But of course, the big benefits are that as you get better at holding space, your partner's going to feel safer and safer with you. And this goes for both partners listening, okay? Your partner will feel more seen and heard and acknowledged and respected. And this is the foundation for the most connected, supportive, and deeply intimate relationship. And for so much more understanding, and for so much less misunderstanding and arguments and divisiveness. And ultimately for so much more fun and lightness and even more physical intimacy. Because generally, as women, we need to feel emotionally connected to be excited about sexual intimacy. So that's something to take note of, my male listeners, right? Your wife, your partner's going to much more likely be physically into you when you're able to show up with her this way. So as my husband and I have gotten better and better at this, the quality of our lives together has also gotten better and better. So it's just so much easier to work through harder things and have a lot more fun and lightness and deeper connection between us two. It's pretty amazing, honestly. So as much as this holding space thing can take a bit of conscious effort or a bit of cultivation to kind of make it a new habit, and it might feel a bit awkward at first because you're not used to it, the benefits you each reap from this are well worth it. And I'd go so far as to say no marriage will really thrive for the long term without this skill, at least not with a highly sensitive woman, because this is so essential for her sense of feeling connected. So just do it, okay? All of you. All right, so in the simplest sense, which you may have already gathered, holding space equals compassionate listening and, I didn't say this part yet, listening to understand. This means that it is very unlike much of how we normally, quote, listen, unquote, which is listening to respond or listening to be right, or listening to exert our opinion, or listening to share our thoughts back at the person or with the person. None of that is wrong, but it is not holding space and is not a way of cultivating emotional intimacy, right? So all of those things, listening to respond, listening to share your opinion, that's fun for intellectual conversation, right? And it has its place, but it is not good for intimacy and truly showing up for the person you love. So let's start talking about how to do this holding space thing by what not to do first, because that's just as important. So holding space is not a time to share your opinion, your judgment of the person or what they're going through or people they're talking about. And it is not a time even to share solutions with your honey. It is not time to tell them that they should do X, Y, or Z, or that they should not be so sensitive or so upset, or that they should start being more whatever, right? This is not a time to fix. And again, I'm going to reiterate this one because this is huge. Holding space and listening compassionately and listening to understand, this is not about fulfilling your very human urge to be right in the situation or to make anything that they are saying wrong. Ooh, that is a tempting urge, I know. But oh boy, will it cause more discord than love and joy between you, especially when your partner's sharing vulnerably or about something deeply important to them. Okay? It is not about you or your thoughts at all. That is so important to remember when you're holding space. So do not give in to the urge to be right, or to say something about you, or to exert your opinion, or to make the other person wrong. Do not give in to that urge when it arises, and it likely will. And that's okay. It's okay that the urge arises. That's very human. Just don't give in to it. Yeah? So do resist the urge to comment or to share your thoughts. And this really can be the hardest part, I know. But I also know you can do it. What else to do? When your partner requests to talk with you, or just spontaneously starts opening up about something, like that's me. I'm always like, blah, 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 right? Like maybe your partner's just starting to launch into how they had a hard day at work, or there's an issue that's bothering them with a friendship or one of their kids, or right, something in your relationship that's hard, or something that if they're opening up about something they'd like to change between you and them, or really anything that seems meaningful and important to them. And most especially when and if they're showing big emotion, do stop what you are doing if you can and switch into holding space mode. So I know that this is not always possible. Like I'm sometimes untactful with this, where I just like launch into something and my husband isn't in the place where he can actually, like he doesn't have time or he's doing something else. So let's be careful about expecting our partner to always be able to hold space whenever we decide we want to blab, right? And partner, if your partner does this, this is a very appropriate time to say, oh, I really want to be here for you and listen. Can we put a pin in this because I'm not able to fully do that for you as much as I'd like right now. And let's circle back to this later and then actually do circle back to it. All right. So that's a side note. But when you can, do stop and switch into holding space mode. And do remind yourself that now is time to listen, to understand, to listen with care, right? And here's a little thing, kind of a little hack that can help remember how to do this. So we want to switch into what we could call the 4 C's mode, right? So you can use the 4 C's to remind yourself how to do this, which is the 4 C's stand for centered, compassionate, connected, and curious. Yep. Centered, compassionate, connected, curious. Yeah. So for the first C, to get centered, just when it's time to hold space, take a moment and come into your body and get centered. If you're new at this, it may mean simply saying, hey, honey, give me a sec. I really want to show up for you and listen. And I just need a quick moment to get more centered, more present. This is not the time for me to tell you how to get centered and present, but the most simple and most popular, or you hear about this the most often, is just taking a big, deep breath, or maybe a few. And just let yourself sort of slip into your body, feel that you have a body, feel that you are in a body. That's really going to help you be centered. Then do slip into compassion and connection. So those are the next 2 C's, right? Compassion and connection. So connect to your warm heart, which is there, no matter who you are. There is a warm, loving heart in here. And you can do that by reminding yourself that just like you, this person that you care about is a human who suffers, who may be suffering at the moment. Or if they don't seem to be suffering, you can remind yourself, this person is a person who wants my care, who wants to be cared for, who needs care, who may be wanting my care at the moment. And really connect to the fact that this is a person you love and a person you are loved by. This is always important, but extra specially so if your partner is talking about something less than warm and fuzzy about you and your relationship, right? Because those are the moments that can be hardest to hold space, that it's most easy to get triggered and defensive, right? Which is what we do not want to do. I did not mention that before. We do not want to get defensive, but that's very important here for holding space. It's really all too easy, especially when things haven't been totally harmonious with your significant other, to go into what we can call threat mode when they're sharing openly, especially when it's about the relationship, right? Which, when we go into threat mode, that will have you seeing and hearing your partner as if through a bad guy filter, right? You know, one of those Instagram filters. It's like, like imagine it's one that makes the person look like a bad guy, right? It makes like their words seem like they're against you. So the invitation is to remember that they are your teammate in life and you are theirs. It's you and your honey against the world or whatever, not against each other. Remind yourself that you love them and that they love you, right? In other words, put on your teammate, team in this wild life together filter, your we love each other glasses. This will connect you to your heart and your care and your ability to hold space. And yes, this is not always easy. As easy as I just said, even, right? I know. And that's, of course, part of why I work in depth with people and why I have a podcast with 150 some episodes on it, right? If it was as easy as me telling you this, you would all just be feeling really connected to your heart, really like a teammate in your life together with your partner, right? there would be no need to listen to this podcast or anything, right? So please have compassion with yourself as you work on this piece. And of course, I'm here to help if you want deeper support with it. I think we all could use that support sometimes, right? To really learn how to get back there and stay there most of the time in our lives with our partner. All right, so that is my little bit on connecting to those second two C's, compassion and connection. And then the fourth C is curiosity. So do slip into curiosity. It may be helpful to think of holding space instead of calling it that as slipping into warm curiosity mode. Or you could think of it as compassionate detective mode, where your prime goal is simply to understand what this wonderful human whom you love is trying to communicate, is trying to express. So get really curious, like you're really perking your ears and making them really big. So being curious means listening without judging, right? So I'm circling back to that. Or at least not getting caught up in anything your brain is offering, any judgment your brain is offering. It might, right? We just don't want to jump on that bandwagon. We don't want to express it out loud. In other words, listen without listening to your own inner commentary. Set it aside if it arises, right? You can always pick it back up and share it later, but while you're holding space, while you're listening to understand, set aside your own inner commentary and come back to listening and being present and being curious, what is going on for this person? I wonder what it is that they're trying to share. I wonder what she wants me to understand or he wants me to understand. What more here is there for me to understand? And from this place of curiosity, you can speak. I'm not saying never say anything. I think in general, do resist the urge to speak, especially if there's commentary. We don't want that. But you can interject with some clarifying questions, such as, could you help me understand that better? Or say more about XYZ, or say more about what you just said, right? These questions are for the purpose of understanding better. Again, they're not to challenge your partner or prove them wrong or sway their thinking in any way at this point. And also, this is not about being totally quiet. That might actually be kind of weird, right? So rather than being completely silent, ask some of those questions. Or you might say things like, yeah, or that makes sense. Or yeah, I get that. I could see that. I can see how you feel that way. Those are ways to signal to your partner that you're listening, that you care, that you are empathizing with them. Really powerful. And one more extra tip that you may not have heard if you've ever heard of this holding space thing, which is to notice what your partner looks like when they're speaking, when they're sharing, right? Because of course, a ton, if not most, communication is non-verbal. So be present enough to notice what their facial expression is communicating, what their body language is transmitting. You naturally do know what, to some degree, their body language is communicating if you're a human, and especially if you're a highly sensitive person. You might notice, for example, the beginning of tears, which signals sadness or distress. Or you may notice a creased forehead, which can mean frustration. And you might even actually sense this in your body as well. You might even kind of feel it, almost feel what they're feeling in your body. So think of this as sort of a multi-sensory listening with more than just your ears. So just notice, again, you're just being curious, and you're just being caring, and you're just noticing. So if the urge to comfort your partner arises, because if you're noticing and sensing distress or pain, just notice that is your care and your compassion arising. That's your heart opening, and that's beautiful. And that is enough right now. That's enough at the moment. Trust that your care and your presence is enough for now while they're speaking, while you are holding space and listening. And it may even be that your partner falls silent. And for a while still, you can stay in that care, that compassion, that holding space presence. You don't need to jump right into solutions or trying to make them feel better. And trust yourself to find the time when that is appropriate for you to offer something. One thing that you can do after they've finished speaking is you can reflect back what they said, if you'd like to, like in their own words or even just your own words. So you're kind of sharing what they said back as you understood it, and ask if that is what they meant, right? Like, oh, I heard you say X, Y, Z. Did I get that right? Is that what you meant? Correct me where I'm wrong. So that can be lovely. I don't think this is always necessary. And at times it can actually feel a bit robotic if you've ever been in that, like practicing this with your partner. It's not my favorite, especially if you're repeating the exact words your partner said. I don't love that, but it could work for your partners. You can try that. But something I like, an alternative that I think is beautiful, is simply saying, thank you for sharing. And is there anything I can do for you? Or even, what do you need? Or what do you need from me? I'd love to support you. So that is the gist of how to hold space, how to listen to understand, and really ultimately how to be there with caring, kind, loving presence for your partner. You know, you can do this for 1 minute, you can do this for 20 minutes, you can do this for an hour. It just depends what's going on. But either way, do it. Do it. Now, I want to offer you an important note, which is that if you do feel reactive or distressed as you're listening, right, as if some triggered emotion does arise as you listen to your partner, it's time for some self-compassion and being there for yourself, right? Some kind, caring presence to yourself, which will help with emotional regulation. So this is not an episode to get into that. But if it happens, just know that there is so much you can do to help yourself move back into a place of receptivity and presence. And if you notice that you really are too triggered to be able to fully listen, that's fine. But do tell your partner, I'm feeling emotionally flooded, or I'm feeling emotional or triggered right now, but I do really want to be there for you. Can we come back to this a bit later once I've calmed down, once I've gotten more centered? And then, of course, do come back to this, right? Don't say that just as a way to get out of having this conversation ever. You will build trust and intimacy by circling back to it yourself, right? Like in a half an hour or 24 hours, right? Like, hey, can we talk about this tomorrow at lunch? Now, I also want to reinforce that this is not about coming up with solutions or necessarily solving a problem in the moment. There are other approaches, other skills, other ways of communicating that are very powerful and helpful for that. Really, holding space is really about being in the process with your partner with presence, with compassion, with curiosity. And from that, you're creating the outcome of connection, right? Not necessarily solutions, but connection, because your partner will feel that presence, will feel you differently, will feel cared about, will feel understood in a way that maybe they have not felt with you in a long time. And that is the outcome that's most needed, most valued in an intimate relationship, especially with a highly sensitive person. Yes, resolving conflicts, coming up with solutions for things is powerful and important, but not as important as the safety and the intimacy and the connection that this builds. So try this spontaneously if you want, like whenever your partner starts sharing, or I think this is a great way to do it, and it's more reliable. It's a more reliable way to bring this skill of holding space into your relationship, which is to plan to practice it a few days a week for the next few weeks. Sit down for 10 minutes, say, and take turns being the one who shares and the one who holds space. right? Like you start off with just each getting 5 minutes for each role. Let it feel awkward. Let it feel uncomfortable. It'll get easier and easier. I promise. It'll feel more and more comfortable. And it's absolutely worth it. Because the ultimate goal and outcome of holding space is to be sensitively present with them, to act out your care and love by simply being fully there for them as they share what is true for them in the moment. For most of us, there really isn't a bigger act of love that can be done on a regular basis, and it will really create a culture in your relationship of so much safety, so much security, trust, care, respect, and love for all of who you each are, which truly is the foundation for so much more of all the joy of partnership to spontaneously show up, like playfulness, flirtiness, laughter, and even passion. So go play with this together and be oh so well.